in the garage. Running out of parts, so I'm waiting on stuff still. But there's some things I can do tonight. It's after work on Monday, March 4th, and we're going to go and throw some parts on. I'm going to put the exhaust manifolds on. I have my exhaust pipe, so I could start mocking up exhaust, but I'm out of gas, and the back end's still up because I don't have U-bolts to put the rear end down on the ground yet. So for tonight, we're going to go ahead and do exhaust manifolds. Just bolt on exhaust manifolds, nothing special, and I'm going to pick which intake I'm going to put on and bolt it on, and maybe if we have time, see if I can get an alternator mounted up. I'm going to have to modify a bracket because all we're going to have on this is just the water pump and alternator. So I'm going to try and use a stock type mount, but not all of it, because I'm going to cut the power steering end of it off. So that's where we're at. So let me get everything set up and we'll bring you along. The manifolds I've chosen are just some eBay cheapies. They fit really, really well. So for my application, I think they'll be fine. I've always preferred exhaust manifolds over headers because they tend not to leak as much. So we're going to go with these, and I think they'll fit the bill just fine. So that's what we're going to stick in. We're going to use some aftermarket exhaust manifold gaskets, and then these, and we'll go from there. So let's get her going. Okay, got my bolts, got my gaskets. Let's get her stuck in here. Like with many gaskets, these are notched, so you just put the two outer bolts in first, let it hang, grab your exhaust manifold gaskets, and these little hooks here, they just drop down and hang on those bolts, and they hang there. And if you're lucky, you drop one of the bolts down, well, you're going to have to find it off camera. It's winter again here in Lakeview. We've had about a foot of snow over the weekend, basically. So there's a good 3 inches in the driveway and probably 6 to 12 in the yard. So that's always fun. We're going to go to Roseburg this next weekend to go pick up some parts. It's probably sounding pretty loud in here because of my heater, but it's 20 degrees outside. You guys are just going to have to deal with it because it's cold. So, my apologies, but I'd just as soon not be totally frozen. Another bonus about these manifolds is the last couple builds I've done have all required some sort of custom exhaust header, which means on all those headers, not a one of them hold a exhaust or a spark plug wire worth a damn, in my opinion. So I've had to pony up and buy the ceramic boots for all of them. Now I'm not complaining. The ceramic boots they're awesome. They sure hold up well. But they're not cheap, especially if you buy a decent set. I think they were $150 or $200 or something like that. They're crazy. You can buy stock LS truck wires for nothing, which for this will be just fine. There's tons of room on these. I've run into one problem. I've been hoarding LS's lately. And stand by. Been hoarding LS's lately, and I don't know which exhaust manifold or which intake manifold was which off which car or truck. I mean, all these came off trucks or Tahoes, but I'll be darned if I can remember which one's which. I do know the last one. I just hope I don't pick the one that I put on this motor originally when it was in my Jeepster, because that one had an issue with bad injectors, which aren't a big deal. If I have a bad injector, I can replace it. This motor is pretty healthy, so I'm not too concerned about the motor's. The motor's fine. Worst thing is I got some injectors that are bad, and I'll have to replace those. But I've got a pile of them, so it's not a big deal. So, got one side. I'm gonna flop the camera around and get the other side, and we'll pick an intake. Throw some light on here that's not blinding the camera. That's better. Okay. found this yesterday when I did the rear end, or set the rear end in, and I found one thing I didn't catch the whole time we've been messing around on this is the tranny pan is not in good shape. It got dropped, or it's been bouncing around the house for years, so more than likely something happened along those lines. But it's going to need, the pan's going to have to come off, back off and get fixed. It's no big deal. It's not the end of the world. To be honest, it was rebuilt. The tranny was rebuilt and stuck in a derby car. And then the derby car had electric problems, so it never got ran. So when we parted the derby car, I just went ahead and pulled that tranny and stuck it in my shed. It's been sitting there for a long time. It was actually in Daryl Swift's sister's derby car back in the day, long time ago. So the early 70s, late 60s Cadillac tranny. Pulled the bell housing off and I stuck that race bell housing on it. So it'll work good for what I needed. So this car is going to be kind of my summer beater. Should be decent enough to take on a trip here and there. My buddy Adam over in Gold Beach has a little Nova. I think it's got a 5.3 in it. Early Nova. And I'd like to go and take this and go cruise next to his little Nova. His is a lot nicer than this car, but the car's size is real similar. It's a lot nicer paint and all that stuff. It's got really nice interior, really nice paint. But I've got a lot less of mine. But I think my motor is going to be marginally healthier than his. So might have to do a little impromptu cruise and see how they actually stack up. I do know I have a lot more room to fit things in mine than he does. That motor is tight, compact wise in that little engine compartment. I had to do a power steering pump in it, and it was tight to get to, tighter than I would have expected. The real issue with his was he had power steering on his car, and the power steering lines were a 1/4 inch from the exhaust, and so it's just nuking the power steering pump all the time. This is a manual box, and it's closed. Close enough that I'm going to end up putting a heat shield over the top of it just to protect it a little bit. But I've got miles more clearance between everything that counts on mine and like what he had. So I think I should be okay. But so right now we've got both exhaust manifolds are sitting on there, and I think our next step is going to go ahead and pull this intake off, and I'm going to line up the other ones and see which one I'm going to bolt up. I've got the intake manifold gaskets over there. I've got a new oil pressure sending unit that I've got to stick in. So I'm going to pause the camera, go round up all that stuff, and bring you back whenever we're ready. Alright, so the intake I've chosen apparently is the only one that isn't broken. All the other ones have something goofy with it, and this one is injury free. I have a feeling with this intake, my hood is going to clear less than it did before, which I'm okay with, because I am definitely I'm going to put a 6-pack scoop on this for hood clearance, but also because I just really like the way the 6-pack scoops look. And it might help to keep the engine a little cooler. Not that these run more. These engines run pretty consistent. Say 205 a lot. You can get them run a little cooler. My buggy with the 5.3 in it, it very rarely gets that warm. But it's a buggy, just has a big radiator and electric fans. My wife had a 97 Jeep TJ Wrangler that it ran about 210 all the time. It didn't really matter what you were doing, whether you're beating on it or crawling or whatever. It had a 97, it was a 97 with a 4.8, about a 2800 stall converter on it, maybe 2600 stall. It was a fun little Jeep. Sold it to a couple in Sisters, I believe, or up that area. Jennifer, if you see this, hope you're still enjoying that Jeep. I know we sure did. That was my first LS build, was that rig. having never done any of it. That was a 4-cylinder 5-speed originally, and it, well, 2.5 liter 5-cylinder or 4-cylinder is anything but powerful. And that 700 R4 with the 5.3. Apparently my ratchet's taking a poop. Or the socket's cracked. But that was a really nice driving Jeep. She could get 18 miles a gallon on 35s with 488s. And when that thing got a whistling, it sounded like she had a big old turbo in it. It was a cool rig. Not super fast, comfortable. That 4.8 wasn't a giant powerhouse, but it sure was. It sure was an upgrade from that 2.5 liter. Well, I've got an intake. So, I guess let's clean up these holes and throw the injectors on, and get this bypass hose in. Get the power brake hose off because we definitely don't need that. If I have anything to do with it, it'll just have stuck with manual brakes. Hopefully manual disc brakes. But I don't know where the power part would work. I know Willwood has a option for manual brakes in this. That will be just fine, and so that's what we're going to stick with. So, alrighty, let's pause it for a minute and get the hose off, and I'll find a set of injectors. Right back. Alright, got my injectors chosen. They're the ones off my newest acquisition, and I think they'll work just fine. So what I'm doing right now is just kind of making sure there's no goobers or anything sticking on the outside of this intake. I'm gonna carefully wipe around the outside of these. Make sure there's no debris on the O-rings. This isn't ideal, guys. Ideally, you want to at least do O-ring seals, but again, I've done this a few times and I've never had an issue. Doesn't mean you won't. But for what I'm trying to do here, it's going to be good. So, got a little grease on this rag, and I'll just a little tiny bit on the O-rings. Just keep them lubed. Make sure they don't score more when I'm putting them in there. Get the grease out of our way. Make sure these are facing the correct way, and you just kind of set them in. Make sure they go straight in. And then what I do is I just push down one at a time until it seats. I'll go ahead and start my bolts. side. Same shirt, same thing. Make sure they seat. Start the bolts. These don't have to be tightened very tight. They're metric. I don't know what metric they are exactly, but similar to a 1/4 inch. Probably a little smaller than a 1/4. You'll see that the only time I ever use a torque wrench in here is on wheels, to learn that lesson, and on internal engine components. Heads, cranks, rod and main bearings, that type of stuff. Other than that, no. It's all by feel. Too many years of shop stuff kind of ruined it for me like that. But I will never not use some sort of torque measuring device on a wheel or on an internal engine component. I learned my lesson. Back in the 80s, no, sorry, late 90s, or early 90s, I mean. I worked at a Chevron station over on Oregon coast, and late night, did a favor for the assistant district attorney of Curry County. Did some late night wheels and tires for him, and about an hour after I get off work, I get a phone call from my boss, who is the owner. Said, "Hey, I need you to meet me with the tow truck." I said, "Okay." Grabbed the tow truck, headed up north of town, and there was my fresh tire job that I thought I was doing the guy a favor, and left one wheel not torqued. Snugged enough for him to make it 18 miles, but not tight enough for him to make it where he was going. It was on a classic 76 Cherokee Chief, the Golden Eagle version. So I had the big eagle on the hood, and I'll never forget, it was root beer brown and gold. And there he is sitting with one tire in the back of his Jeep and the quarter panel destroyed. So I got to learn how to do a quarter panel the hard way, which was no fun. So yeah, always torque your wheels. Don't listen to anybody. German isn't good enough on a tire job. Those who know what German is, it's Guten tight. Guten tight on a wheel, not so good. Alright, we've got an intake sitting on here. We've got exhaust manifold sitting on here. We've got injectors, fuel rail, all that stuff is all on here. We've got the brake booster line off and plugged. I've got this line here sitting here somewhere, right here. Starting to look like an engine. Alrighty, I am pleasantly happy. I found that I can use a stock V8 radiator. It's similar to all the conversions I've done before. The lower hose is on this side, which is good. The upper's about here, which is a little tougher, but with the Terminator X, I'll just run an air cleaner straight off it, run the hose over, and I always put a junction with a 1/8 inch pipe thread and a 90-degree fitting, and I run my steam vent hose into that. It works real well. I've done a number of those that way now. Yeah. So we're getting there. I'm gonna go ahead and get these old fuel lines off. Whoever pulled this didn't pull those. They just looks like they whacked them. And I want to get those plugged, so let me get those off. We'll get alternator bracket over here and see if we can get that modified to make it work. Well, I screwed up again and forgot to hit record when I started this, but I have a alternator mount that I've modified. Basically, I just cut the bottom off and ground it smooth. Maybe I shouldn't have cut it before I checked to see if it was going to fit. I thought I read somewhere where it would fit just fine. So far, oh, it'd help if I would put it in the right hole. That's going to fit fine. That will be just fine. Now I think I started alluding to this earlier. This is going to be my summer kind of beater car. I am seriously debating the need for a heater. So what do you guys think? Should I leave the heater in? Should I get rid of the heater box and just put one of the hot rod heaters just so it's small and, or should I leave it as is and just hook it up and hope for the best? Or should I delete it completely and just use that fancy, nice hole for my harness to go through? I have bought this fancy little firewall bracket that is meant for the Ollie Terminator X to go through. So it would look pretty clean on there, given the fact that I could find a spot that goes directly in the car and enough room somewhere in here. I think I could probably stick it right here, or maybe behind where the old voltage regulator went. That'd work pretty good too. But we don't know. Tell me what you think. Should I leave the heater on? In? It's definitely not going to be driven in the winter. It's going to be too rowdy and too scary to drive in the winter. But I guess it's not hurting anything if it's there. So what do you guys think? Heater? No heater? I'm really debating doing away with the window regulators and doing like they did in the old school hot rods, like the Hemi darts and stuff, and I'll leave the glass, but have the seatbelt style open and close, where you just, to go up, you just pull the seatbelt out of the window channel and latch it to the side of the door. Or, I don't know. Be cool. But I don't think it's necessary either, so who knows. This will have Holley Terminator X for sure. It's the only way to do it with these truck manifolds. But right now, I'm super close. I'm going to have to get a different belt, because no power steering pulley right there. And I think, well, I'm definitely going to have to replace that. I chipped that somehow. I don't know when, but I did. That's the tensioner pulley, which I've got a pile of them laying around here. Huh. Starting to look like a car. What do you guys think? Comment. Let me know. I think if I had drive shaft, steering, and brakes, I could have this thing running pretty quick. On a fuel system. Don't know what I'm going to do about the fuel system. I need to get the car back on the ground and see, do I modify the stock tank, run an external fuel pump? Do I use my old Jeepster tank, or my old buggy tank? It'd be nice, because that's stock fuel pump and cleaner. Fit inside the trunk, I think. But, alright, well, I think that's all for tonight. I'm pretty sure my wife's texting me, letting me know dinner's ready. But, yeah, not too bad. I'm happy with the progress. We'll have more on the next day. Hopefully we can get a little bit more done this week, and we'll see what we get done before we take off on Friday. We're close. Really close. Alright, catch you guys next. Alright. So I've remeasured and I ordered a different belt. You can already tell this is much better. That other one was clear down at the bottom of the pulley, so there's not enough to pull. And we were right in the range of motion. We were perfect. Awesome. So something went well today. You can find an air cleaner. With the Terminator X, all you have to do is have a little stubby, so that'll be fine. I still need to get hoses. This is a radiator that a guy in Plymouth made for his Barracuda. And so it's 4-core brass radiator. It is as big as you can fit in this hole. And it is going to be tons of radiator for this motor. So that's really, really good. It even actually has a pipe plug here for a steam port. It wasn't intended for a steam port, but it'll work good for me using it as a steam port. So that's great too. Super solid. I don't know why he pulled it, but it doesn't leak. I had it looked at. So we're good there. Pause and see if I can come up with anything else to do today.